Okay, so we're pretty much live, but I'll tell you when I can see you. You can't actually see it yet. Okay, you can see it now.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia live stream. I'm Amy, I'm one of the counsellors at GenderGP, and I get to host this awesome panel of very exciting, interesting people, and we're going to talk about all sorts of exciting things. I don't know if everybody just wants to just take a couple of minutes just to say hi, introduce yourselves, tell everybody what you do. I don't know, tell me about your pets, anything at all, just to get to know you a bit. Should we start with Nate? No.
I'm joking. Yeah, so I'm Nate. I don't know where to start with this part. Okay, so people might be more familiar with me as being a musician. Some people might be more familiar with the fact that I've transitioned a few years ago and have been quite public about my journey and documenting things. And then I also, I'm the founder of an organization called TNB Connect, which stands for Trans and Non-Binary Connect. So that's a bit of a brief of who I am and what I do.
Amazing. Okay, well, I might come back to what TNB Connect does a little bit later, because that would be interesting to know. Let's go for Marianne.
You would, wouldn't you? I'm Marianne Oakes. I'm a co-worker with Amy, a counsellor at GenderGP, and I basically like to think that I help to look after the mental and emotional well-being of our patients. I do tend to act as mentor to the other counsellors, being sadly the only trans member of the team, but hopefully they get some benefit from that. As regards my pets, I have got 2 pets which drive me to distraction, but seeing as we're talking about self-care, you know, I think they're part of my self-care as well. So I've got Stanley, the Springer Spaniel, who's been chasing the hares in the field recently, and we've got Meg, who's a border collie. So 2 really energetic dogs and very intelligent dogs that take my mind completely off everything trans and counselling related. I think that's it.
That's so good to hear. Okay, Rhy.
Hi, I'm Rhy. I am non-binary, they, them. I'm the Quality Assurance Officer at GenderGP. I'm also the co-host of a trans comedy podcast called Pronouns in Bio, which is very silly. So check that out if you want something very silly to listen to. And I'm also approaching the end of my PhD, but I'm not quite there yet. But one day.
What's your PhD? What you do?
It's in Native American literature, so quite out there.
It's really good to have everybody here. And talking of podcasts, I don't know if you heard the most recent podcast that Marianne and Helen did, but they were talking in that about, you know, how valuable it would be to have a group of trans people just sharing their experiences and thoughts, and how rich the learning could be from that. So I'm hoping that that's kind of what we're going to be able to do today. And hopefully some people are watching, and we've got some questions from people and some comments from people to bring in. And if there's anybody watching that wants to comment, you know, pop the comment in and we'll hear it, or we'll see it, and we'll chat about that as well. IDAHoBiT. What does that mean for you, IDAHoBiT Day? What does just start by sort of just telling me a little bit about what this day means to you. Anyone? Or I will pick someone.
I'll go. I think this day, I think it's important for the awareness. We've got days that celebrate and you know, build awareness on certain topics, but I think this is something, especially right now, that is really important, and it's the phobia aspect of things, which obviously includes the discrimination and hate towards trans people, bi people, LGBT people on a whole. So I think it's building that awareness and understanding and the effects of that that's really important. I think that's what that means to me today.
Yeah, so kind of raising awareness that this goes on. This is not something that doesn't happen. It does happen. People express their hatred, their phobias towards LGBT people.
I think it's really important as well that we recognise that we tend to live in a diverse phobic world, whether we like it or not. And that doesn't mean to say that everybody in that world is transphobic or homophobic or biphobic. It just means that the language and the way we are raised and conditioned is not conducive with how we perceive ourselves in the world, and that on every day, even in very simple ways, that we are dealing with something that is phobic. Bear in mind, phobic means fear of, and I think that gets forgotten sometimes. And I do think that the wider population does have a fear of change, and what we're doing is challenging their ideas of how things should be, and that when children are raised to be a certain way and we don't fit that, people are frightened that, oh my God, our whole world's going to fall apart. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily about people just attacking or being overtly phobic. It's about trying to change the world, and hopefully today we'll do it. We'll go some way towards that.
Yeah. What about you?
I think it's for me, it's important that it's a way of recognizing the sort of discrete ways in which those three different phobias kind of manifest, but also kind of more importantly than that they are connected, and that there is more that unites us than divides us. And so it's important, I think, during a time when wedges are kind of trying to be driven between different members of the LGBT community, that a day like this kind of reminds us that we're all in it together and we have shared experiences.
That's really important. And the theme, obviously we're sort of focusing on self-care, which I think is really interesting, but the theme of the day is together, resisting, supporting and healing. So what does it mean for you to resist transphobia, homophobia, biphobia? What does that look like? What does resisting that look like?
A really interesting question, I have to say. Never thought about it's just so ordinary and everyday that if I spent every day purely resisting, I suppose I become compliant in many ways sometimes. Just because if I just spent every day resisting it, I would never probably step outside the door. So yeah, I'm challenged there, Amy, I'm not going to lie.
Sorry.
I think for me it's persisting nonetheless. That it is still, waking up and going outside the front door regardless. That's in itself is like an act of resistance to me.
Yeah,
I agree with that as well.
There's just being you in the face of expressed and sometimes unexpressed transphobia.
I think that's really important as well, isn't it? Yeah, just going out and facing the world regardless, kind of just. I almost feel where it's overtly, where there's overt transphobia in particular, which is really prevalent. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. GenderGP know better than anybody just how challenging it is to even be a doctor working in this area at the moment, let alone being trans. And I think where it's overt, the reality is they're trying to keep us in. They want us to be ashamed and they want us to go into hiding. They want us to be where we were 20 years ago, where we were just kind of some humorous curiosity that went on in the background. When the truth of the matter is we're not, and we are very visible. So visibility, I think, is probably the best form of resistance, that we're not going to be kept down.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a message come through saying resistance is persistence, just living your best life.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a way, I guess I definitely don't want to frame today in any way around cis people, but is there anything they can do, allies can do, to help resist, to help fight what would you want them and what do you need them to do?
Stay informed, I think, is one for me, that particularly when things change quite frequently, our situations, like legally as well as medically and things like that. I think things are changing a lot, mostly in a bad way. And I think that the more cis people that are informed about that and understand what's happening, that's just like the first step that you need to take to be an ally, is to, you know, have the same information and keep up to date with it. It can be, I find it quite hard to speak to some friends that, you know, they completely have no idea. And then when you tell them, they're like, God, that's really awful. I didn't know about that. I think a bit more of a proactive approach to stay informed, if it does matter to you, would make those conversations with your trans friends a lot easier. Yeah.
That's true. I think it's the understanding as well, because there's a lot of things that, you know, I probably go through and I speak to friends and family about that wouldn't necessarily, their first reaction sometimes is, oh, I would never have thought of that, or you have to go through that. So some things that are like everyday, normal things that people go through, that they don't even think of, that's big issues for us and big challenges that we have to go through. So I think it's the understanding and, you know, obviously education and learning and listening to people's experiences as well. I'm quite lucky that the people around me are willing to learn and understand. And I think once that happens, that's where the acceptance comes.
I think the challenge sometimes is the privilege that cis people have. They don't fully understand how that it's a privilege. So, for example, you know, I was talking to somebody recently about the gender recognition certificate, you know, and the idea had been posited that, you know, if we had a gender recognition certificate and somebody challenged us in the toilet, we could show them that gender recognition. Like that would negate the issue. You know, I said that equality is about that we can all go to the bloody restaurant and use the toilets. That's the problem, not whether we have a certificate or not. That just adds to the problem. And I just think that privilege of just being able to go anywhere and do anything without a second thought, that I think most trans people would crave. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but there's always that element, am I safe here? And I think cis people could really help us by acknowledging that we don't always feel safe and just putting an arm on our shoulders, even if it's only a metaphorical arm, and just saying, come on, you're safe, you know, and allowing us, you know, when we walk into somewhere, even the doctor's surgery, you know, the amount of people I talk to that daren't speak to the GP about their gender, it's ridiculous. So yeah, just that finding ways to make us feel safe, to that they understand.
There's a comment that's come through from someone that's watching. So hi, that's awesome that you're watching. Similar to what you were saying, Marianne, actually, for me, resisting transphobia looks like assuming that I will be given the same treatment, the same respect as everyone else, and treating that as the default. Assuming transphobia up front legitimizes it. That's a really good point.
I think that's a really good point. I think sometimes I have to remind myself of that sometimes, that I think I set my standards too low because I'm expecting transphobia or some kind of, you know, fundamental misunderstanding. And I think that it's actually really important to keep your bar set high and expect respect from people and call it out when you don't get it.
It's interesting, isn't it? You know, what you've all said is sort of learn, go research, listen to trans people, listen to what their experiences are. One of my tips on the list was never take a headline at what it says. And, you know, I was thinking particularly within the counselling world and training counsellors to be, you know, more aware of trans issues. There was an article that was posted on Facebook a week ago about, it was from Australia, and there was a suggestion that within this particular educational setting, they were trying to move away from gendered terms for parents, so mum and dad. And the minute I saw it, I thought, oh, that's just going to make everybody hate trans people, because that's and then, you know, in the comments, it's you can't take away the word mum from me. No one's trying to. So it's the headlines are just so frustrating sometimes, and I just kind of want to say, no, go and actually listen to what trans people are saying and are talking about when it comes to gender neutral words and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think that like the headline is designed to make you click on it, and like the publication doesn't care about who they upset with that because you clicked on it. Even if you clicked on it when you were angry, you still clicked on it, right? So I think it's, yeah, like check your sources, and as you said, like listen to what trans people actually think of the news. Don't just take the BBC's word for it.
Just to go back to the question before, you know, what can cis people do? Go and get to know some trans people if you really
Yeah.
And don't
I was going to say the same thing.
Don't just go and get to know one. Go and get to know a few people. I think I've said it a few times. You know, usually I will, when I do a talk with counsellors, I always say I'm Marianne and I am a transgender woman. If you want to know what I mean by that, then you're going to have to come and get to know me beyond this conversation, because it's not just a simple statement that tells you everything you need to know about me. So you just go and get to know some trans people if you really care. The sad part is the headlines. People don't read beyond the headline, and it's also set the tone. Even if they do read behind the headline, they've got an unconscious bias about what they want to get out of the article because they're already angry purely by the headline.
I think these kind of articles as well, when people have no understanding or any like knowing any trans people or anybody that can get that information from, the go off that as kind of like gospel. But yeah, it's I think people do need to, you know, pay more attention to listening to people and understanding us, and not so much going for that clickbait, because that's sometimes what these articles are, the clickbait, to create that shocking kind of feeling inside you so you want to go on there and click it. But it's not our stories, and the fact that, you know what, if you're reading that, some people kind of paint everybody with that same brush because that's all they kind of know of. Or there's a certain stereotype that trans people are supposed to be a certain way, or we like certain things, we do certain things, say certain things, but we're all different. And I think that's the point as well, that we're all human beings with our own thoughts, our own opinions, our own likes and dislikes. But we kind of get painted with, this is the kind of people we are, and this is our views, and we're here trying to, you know, brainwash the world into this, that, and the other. And it's just like, this is ridiculous. Like, we're just human beings trying to live and just trying to, we're going through this. So for us to actually, you know, have the time to say, we're here offering our stories for people to understand, that's a lot for us to actually go through sometimes as well. And, you know, and we do that so people can understand us. And I think people need to, you know, just see how much courage sometimes you need in doing that, so people will learn.
That's so true, and it's, those stories are so important. And I look at my journey extracting myself from religious transphobic and homophobic beliefs. YouTube was the place where I learned, and people sharing their stories, I learned so much from that. That was the beginning of the unlocking of the door of you know, the journeys that some people have to go through. So where would you send people to, like, you know, if they don't know anyone that's trans, what resources would you say, you know, these are great to go and hear trans people's stories?
GenderGP website. At the risk of self-promotion, but there's just there's a world of information there. That's just a good starting point. But, you know, you could go to, I suppose, mermaids. I think the trouble is trawling the internet indiscriminately. You're going to come across, you know, things to just, if you're coming at this with an unconscious bias, you're just going to reinforce what you're feeling. And if the media has told you that all trans women are predators, then you're going to go and look for the predators. And you know, so it's kind of coming at it with an open mind, which I'm assuming, Amy, you were lucky enough to do. But You know, not
Yeah,
everybody does that.
Go on. On the, you know, if you're coming at it with this kind of unconscious bias and particularly this impression of trans women, I found Disclosure, the documentary on Netflix, was really good about the ways in which the media has reinforced certain ideas about trans people since the beginning of cinema, basically.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a good primer for like cis and trans people to watch and be like, oh, I actually have been exposed to a lot of this stuff, often without realizing it, or I was too young at the time, but that was actually a really damaging thing to see.
Yeah.
I thought it was well put together.
Yeah, agreed. It's great documentary.
Interestingly enough, I was angry at myself when I watched that because, you know, growing up, I bought into the idea. It just reinforced shame inside of me because that's what people like me do. I didn't know as a kid growing up that it was nothing, you know, it was just fantasy, people's perceptions. So, yeah, and I think a lot of trans people probably would be angry. I think even some of the people in the film who'd played the parts that reinforced it then look back in horror at what they'd been compliant with. So, yeah, great film. I'd forgotten about that, Risa.
I can also recommend bookshelf right here. It's probably backwards, but it's Beyond the Gender Binary by Elok Manon. It's a little tiny primer about kind of non-binary identities, and it breaks down what we mean when we say the gender binary, and it's a really short read, so if you're looking for like a primer, I recommend that.
Again, really interestingly there, because I think one of the problems that a lot of people have trying to find information is it's very academic, very science-based, or, you know, and I don't know about anybody else here, but I get turned off by that myself, you know, and I do think actually short, informative, little and often is probably the best way. You know, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't try to understand what it's like being trans, but try to understand how it's okay, for want of a better way. But yeah, short and sweet. I'm music, mate, I have to say. A little cue for you there. Listen to some good music, good lyrics.
Do a duet.
Well, not right now, but
yeah, that's excellent. So we've got a couple of comments that have come through. The government are trying to arrange some kind of international congress on LGBTQIA plus progress and protections. This from an ECHR that has just nixed GRA reform and not helped with the GIC situation. Okay, so yeah, just a comment on the situation of life right now, I suppose. And an international congress sounds good. Would anything change from that?
I think the point about if it's coming from the European Court of Human Rights, or is it not? That's not the acronym. The UK version, the one that's like fighting for the transphobes in court at the moment.
Right.
I think taking it out of UK hands might be a good idea. Getting some international perspective.
Yeah.
I think the issue that I would have with anything like this is who's organising it and what are they hoping to achieve? Because when I read research, I just think, God, you know, why would you even ask them questions? Why was that even you know, it just comes from a very cis-normative perspective. And that's not saying there's anything wrong with cis-normative. If you want to understand trans, then it's got to come from a trans perspective. So if you're going to have a conference, where are the trans voices? That's the reality. And who are we, you know, who's it to serve? Is it to serve educating more trans people? I'm not sure that would achieve, but if it was trans people educating cis people, then I think then maybe there is a point to the exercise.
Yeah, another comment just came through saying cis people must give trans and non-binary people the chance to represent themselves and really take cis people out of the conversation and the equation, really.
when we talk about the trans rights, we've got these people saying, but our rights will take away their rights. It's not even an argument. I'll be honest with you, I don't want to take anybody. My rights are your rights.
Mm.
That's what we're arguing for. And I do think our voices have been erased because people are just shouting louder, trying to hold on to their rights. Not naming anyone, but you know, that's how it comes across.
Nothing about us without us.
Yes. I love that. Love sound. That sound.
There's a little sound clip for you. I can't take credit for that though. I didn't come up with it.
But wouldn't it be great? You know, I had someone, and I think it's some tweets that I'd seen shared on Instagram, where they were just expressing, you know, trans person was expressing their anger at having to prove to cis people what they want to hear to get the help they need. And I totally felt, you know, a bit called out on that because of the role that I have within GenderGP. You know, I'm holding a hoop to be jumped through, and so wouldn't it be great if that was not the case? So someone saying that the Beyond the Gender Binary is one of the best books they've ever read. Yeah, so agreeing with you. And again, another shout out for disclosure. Oprah Winfrey said that she'd watched it and before interviewing Elliot Page and found it quite helpful.
There's a really good clip of, like, if you can stomach the transphobia, of Oprah interviewing, I can't remember who it is now, but like interviewing a trans guest 20 years ago and then interviewing Elliot Page. And yeah, like Oprah's come a long way. Like, she had work that needed to be done, and it appears that she's done it.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I'm going to be fair on Oprah. You know, 20 years ago, the language that the trans community would have used for itself. I'm going to go back 25 years. You know, I went to a transvestite, transsexual, cross-dresser support group. That's what it was billed as. You know, you would never see that so much now. And I must admit, there is some people of a certain generation feel transsexuals being erased, and whether it is or not is a slightly separate issue. But you know, the truth of the matter is, the language has evolved, and actually people's awareness, there's less excuse for somebody to be transphobic now. I think we could forgive somebody 20 years ago by today's standards, I suppose. But yeah, that's a really good way of measuring it, isn't it? Seeing somebody interviewed 20 years apart and seeing how it's changed.
Yeah, long way to go, but we've come a long way as well. Yeah.
We shouldn't forget that, I think. I put out a tweet recently just saying that it's horrible at the moment. You know, we're in this really horrible fight, this very public, certainly from a social media point of view, battle that is completely horrible. I mean, there's just no, and much as, you know, the haters, or whatever we want to call them, the gender critics, which sounds a little too soft, you know, some of the language they use is vile, and they just use it and they put it out there purely for the aim of hurting. And then we get this other side going back, you know, just swearing, and it's just this, you know, really big shouting match. But I put this tweet out just saying that actually 25 years ago, nobody even recognized we were here. You know, this is the pain of visibility that we're going through. And much as it's horrible, maybe it's a pain a bit like with in the 80s and the 90s for the gays, the gay and lesbians and bi people, that you know, when the AIDS crisis hit, it was horrendous. I mean, you know, the media onslaught was awful. And the medical teams, I don't know if people watched It's a Sin recently, and it kind of showed you how bad it was for them, you know, back then. And I just think this is our time. And yeah, horrible as it is, I'm hoping we get through it. But I'm hoping when we get through it, things have improved and it quietens down. But, you know, I think it was worse when people didn't recognise we even existed. And there was no education, there was no change in the language. And painful as it is, I still feel it's something that we needed to go through. I don't know how you two feel about that, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on the flip side, I think having come a long way as well has helped trans people, because back 25 years ago, I'm in my 30s now. So 25 years ago, I was very sure of who I was, but there was no language, there was no understanding. It was kind of like there was nobody else that I could really talk to or educate myself. The only kind of words that I heard that might have been close were, words like transvestites, transsexuals. Then there were the media perception of these people. So I remember the whole Jerry Springers and, like trans women, that's the majority. I never really saw trans men growing up. In fact, I didn't. It was trans women that were mocked and made fun of. And that's what it was. It was an embarrassment to be transvestite or cross-dresser or whatever. So I never had that language personally until later on in my 20s. And that's a very long time of, going through what I'm going through and not being able to talk to anybody, feeling like I was very open and being silenced because there was no education. And I think it was a long time kind of coming for me. But I do think it's better now for me. I've been able to, I think it's been a lot easier than it would have been for me 25 years ago to say, this is how I feel and whatever. I actually tried to say that and I was shut down. So I've kind of seen the difference in saying that at this age and how it's being taken. And I've always said quite publicly, I had a perception and a feeling of anxiety and I this whole perception and expectation that I was very certain what was going to happen when I came out. And I took that risk to actually go and do it on live TV because I was like, let's just get it over and done with. This is going to happen. I know it's going to happen, but do you know what I mean? Let's just get it done in one go. But the shock after that was the fact that kind of my expectations wasn't actually true. They didn't actually happen. There was a lot of people like supportive and people that I actually thought was going to be totally against it, that was willing to learn and saw things that maybe I didn't see in myself growing up. And do you know what I mean? So yeah, years ago, I definitely wouldn't have been able to have these conversations and, be myself. So it's kind of, I say to myself, I get a bit peeved sometimes that it's taken so long and I've reached this age and I feel like there's a majority of life that I wish I could go back and redo again as the person I am now. But at the same time, I know how hard it would have been for myself as well, because there still wasn't no education or anything. I don't know how my mental health or my physical safety or anything would have been back then.
Yeah,
I think it's touching on what you were saying about how your expectations, what actually happened didn't meet your expectations and you're expecting a lot more resistance. I think, like, for me, I sometimes lose sight of the fact that majority of people do support us. It's just that there are a very vocal minority of people, mostly online, that will just shout and scream, and they take up a lot of attention, and the media likes to pander to them and because it makes content for them. But actually, I remember being really surprised by the GRA reform survey that came back, and it was it like 74% of respondents supported the reform? Obviously, it didn't go anywhere, but I was never expecting it to be that high. I was expecting us to be in the minority of that one. And yeah, that like weirdly gave me some comfort that actually, no, like most people do support us and our rights. It's just, unfortunately, the airtime gets given to the bigots rather than to us, because it generates more views.
I think it's really important to understand as well as our footprint's just getting bigger and bigger. For every one trans person that is out, they've got family members, they've got neighbours, they've got friends, and despite what I read on social media and what comes into my awareness via different means, when I step outside into the world, actually, I don't feel anything other than love, really. I do think overwhelmingly that people do support us, or not necessarily support us, but just want us to get on with our lives and want it all to shut up. And, coming back to the transphobia then, though, that, it's a little bit like any subject, isn't it? That, silence isn't always... is it silence is compliance? You know, so yeah, we go out into the world, more and more people are getting to understand that we're there. We are more visible. It's helping younger people. It's helping people of all ages, actually, to understand themselves better. But actually, you know, the more people get to know us, the more people that come out, the more family members get to know. I think that education will start to grow from that. I think, like you just said before, where would somebody that's got no connection go to learn? I'm not quite sure. But, you know, if you speak to enough people, you'll find there's somebody in your periphery that's trans, and then make an effort to reach out to them.
That's really important. There's lots of comments coming through as well with people that are totally resonating with that, the change that they see. And someone said they agree that things have come a long way. They've noticed a positive difference in society in general. It's just a shame that there's a vocal online minority of haters and institutional phobia from within healthcare, which is so true. So there is a shift, but not in an area that we desperately need the shift. Will that come within healthcare?
Oof.
Great.
Yeah, I think GenderGP, like, it's needs to keep doing what it's doing and being an example, setting an example for how it should look. And as like more word spreads and more people rely on our services, and, you know, we've always said that one of our aims is to eventually make ourselves redundant, so, because then everyone is getting the care they need under the NHS. I think being a model for that can only help things along.
I get the privilege of sitting with other healthcare professionals talking about this. I also, through GenderGP, you know, we were speaking to the Royal College of Pharmaceutical or something like that. I can't remember. I apologise to whoever they were, the chemists. But the theme always is ignorance. You know, well, our members haven't been able to get prepared for this, and I just get so angry. You've chosen not to prepare. They cannot be a doctor. They cannot be a chemist. They cannot be anybody in the medical world that doesn't know that trans people exist. And you choose not to get educated. And you wait till somebody walks into your surgery or into your shop and then suddenly go into meltdown because you didn't bother to get educated. But yes, I do believe it will change. It's got to change because there's just too many people now needing the healthcare and they can't ignore it any longer. But to keep pleading ignorance just isn't good enough. That would be my take.
Yeah. So ignorance is no longer an excuse, and for anybody, I think, really now.
It's never an excuse for anything, is it? Ignorance. We choose to be ignorant. But yeah, certainly when we're talking about, there's another side to this as well. There's got to be a political will, and you know, we can talk about how great society is, and it is, generally speaking. You know, we do go out, we are accepted by our families, or generally speaking, or we're certainly accepted by our friends, and we can talk about that. But it counts for nothing if there isn't going to be a swing with political will. That GRA reform survey showed that 74% of people wanted it to be reformed, and they said, yeah, but that was just trans people that answered. You know, that the political will wasn't there for change. They wanted it to come back the other way so they could sweep it under the carpet. So we've got to get the political will. So actually, just a call to arms now of anybody listening. Cis people, you really want to help, if you genuinely care, write to your MP and tell them to get that reform sorted. Because we're being ignored. Apparently we filled the survey in and nobody else did. So what we need is cis people. Let the electorate know. Let your MP know that the electorate want reform. So that's a very simple way that could be done.
Well, we'll have to see if we can get some templates up on the website of just, you know, click here, send this to your MP, just so you're right, that people know people actually do care about this and want this. It's and yeah, that seems to be the bigger mountain to climb, is how do you change the political will? It's, I mean, even just recently, you know, yay, great, gonna ban conversion therapy, but we'll just see how the public feel about it first before we actually just make a very simple change.
They're not actually interested, I think, in hearing what the public think about it.
No.
What it does is it just gives columnists the clickbait that they need to make the money that they want to make from us. It gives the Times columnists excuses to write about how trans people deserve conversion therapy, and because it makes money, that's it. Like, I think that there is a small proportion of very powerful people at the top, and that consists of like journalists and politicians and one particular children's author who have an enormous amount of influence and power, but I hope that they aren't representative of the actual electorate and the actual public views. They just seem like they are because they have the power to share their views, and the rest of us don't.
Yeah. And someone saying online as well that, you know, that I completely agree with what you're saying, Rhy, about public support. They've been surprised by neighbours, local business people, but there are very noisy transphobes online, and so it disproportionately makes you feel like you're not going to be accepted. But actually the vast majority of people, I think, really are okay / don't care, not to downplay any, you know, gender violence and stuff that happens, but hopefully the vast majority of people are supportive.
I guess that kind of feeds into my self-care tip, which is like, just come off of Twitter for a bit.
Yeah.
I'm really bad for it. I'll find myself, the first thing I do when I wake up is I look at my phone and look at my Twitter feed, and the last thing I do before I go to bed is I look at my phone and I look at Twitter, and then I wonder why I feel rubbish. And I really have to remind myself that, you know, it's not actually healthy to be tapped into 300 people's stream of consciousness multiple times a day and hear everybody's opinions about everything, when what I need to do is just turn it off and like do something that doesn't involve a screen. Even if it's just for a couple of hours. I just find that's really helpful for like grounding me again and reminding me that actually like Twitter doesn't represent the world.
Yeah. That segues us nicely into self-care, and I feel like that kind of fits into the healing part of the theme. So resisting, supporting, healing. We've talked about resisting and supporting, and healing. I mean, you know, if over here is like what it means to be healed, it's going to be to have that acceptance, that political will, that all of that. So over here, which is where we are right now, how do we look after ourselves in the resisting? What does healing look like in this fight and against transphobia, biphobia, homophobia?
I think there's an important point to make. Self-care is really important. I think as counsellors, Amy, you and I both know it's a big part of our training, and, you know, being able to be a counsellor and keep professional standards, keep your own sanity. Self-care is really important. I think it's sad that we have to talk about self-care just for somebody going about the life in that context. Although we do know when we do counselling with people, we do encourage self-care, because, you know, whether it's work or whatever, going back to what you said, Rhy, there, you know, turning off social media, I think for short periods is really important, but I think that should happen anyway, whatever walk of life you're in. You know, you can have two. But I also think we've also got to remember that people get a massive amount of support from social media. And what we're saying is that you've got to cut yourself off from the support because this other stuff's coming in. So I think, you know, maybe just be a bit more selective about how you run your social media, I think would be really important. And I'm going to go back to the cis people, to any cis people that are listening now. Do you know, if we want to improve social media, then you get involved in the fight. I get pile-ons all the time. It's horrendous when it happens. I don't even know where these people come from. I don't know how many people I've blocked now, because I do just block them when they come. But when they pile on, I get at least 50 to 100 people coming after me with the most vile comments. It is only designed to make me feel bad. And never, of my 5,000 followers, never do I get a pile-on back from any cis people. I have to go and just delete. I can't even answer them. And I sometimes think, actually, you know, the cis people, I don't know if, you know, make it clear in your profiles that you support and you stand with trans people. You know, you don't have to be an activist to do that. But I do think, you know, it's a bit like the Black Lives Matter. It's a bit like, you know, saying you're a feminist or whatever, you know, that you stand with the LGBTQ community. And at this current time that you stand with trans people. I think that's really important.
Because sometimes I think the fight can seem so big, you sort of almost, there comes a point where you almost feel guilty for turning off and taking a break. But you're right, Marianne, there's a real balance between where you get your support being the same place that also is the oppressor.
I will follow that up though as well, because it's very easy to sit on your own reading social media. And one of the things that I've struggled with lockdown is just getting out and meeting people and meeting friends. And on one hand, I'm saying on social media, this bombardment, but when I walk out into the world, I only feel love. And I think even if you only make an excuse to go down to your local shop to pick up a pint of milk, or any excuse just to get out of the house, to break away from that very toxic environment that as it can be, you know, pick up the phone and speak to a friend. You know, when we're talking self-care, it's very easy when we're feeling bad about ourselves is to withdraw into ourselves. And actually, if you recognize that's happening, then don't be frightened to reach out. And again, to the, you know, the allies out there, you know, if you've not heard from your friend for a while, just pick up the phone and ring and see how they're doing. You know, just make that effort just to check in with people. There's two people listening here today, I hope at least, who, you know, sometimes I just drop a message and ask how they're doing, only because sometimes I just need some human interaction, you know, that's away from work. And you know, now and then I'll just say, "Oh, we've not spoke for a while," just to reconnect. So yeah, self-care, acknowledging when you're in a bad place or heading towards a bad place, and just getting up and not retreating to your bedroom or retreating to your phone, but actually reach out.
Nate, have you got any, you know, sort of not necessarily just tips for self-care, but kind of what it means for you in how you balance the fight versus the care?
I speak about this quite a bit on social media from my own personal experiences, the fact that I've worked in healthcare and therapy and different coping mechanisms I picked up through doing that. But I think I don't really go on Twitter for my own mental health. I don't go on there. You know, I don't like to see certain things. I like to kind of have that protective bubble around me where, you know, I'm not really letting anything in, all my energy towards it, because some things are upsetting and you really can't help the fact we're not robots. So, do you know what I mean? These things can really affect us. But self-care for me, and what I try and do within TMB, is we empower people and build confidence. And I think behind that is that confidence to know you accept yourself, you love yourself, you work on yourself, you do everything, you know, do the things you love, stay away from the things you don't like. And it's just having that time to understand what you do and what you don't like, educating yourself on who you are. Then it becomes less important, which I've said, it becomes less important what people do say, or the effect of it is less than it can actually be. Because you've given all that love and time towards yourself and understanding and accepting yourself, that, you know, I think some people can become less of a problem. that's something that I think anyway, personally.
That's really important. And what you're describing there is kind of a journey. It sounds like you've been on a journey to kind of understand what that means for you. You've picked up tips and techniques through various different places to learn that setting boundaries is self-care, and knowing what you need is self-care.
I've definitely picked that up, and I think through my own experience as well. As I said earlier, I'm a musician, but the times where I was actually coming through in the music scene, we didn't have this indulgence of social media and Instagram. We had MySpace and SoundCloud, so it was a bit more, we was kind of less accessible, and we didn't have comments and the likes and the follows and all these kind of crazy stuff going on where people can just literally get through to you just instantly. But yeah, I think I've had experiences through obviously going through the music industry, and then obviously transitioning. It was a big shock for me because now we're in a world of social media and people can actually get through to me and say things, and you know, it can be a bit and make you feel different emotions, should I say, but at the same time it is picking up you know, that understanding and acceptance of myself. And I think when I first started transitioning, it was a bit of a shock, and I wasn't, you know, there were certain things that I wasn't completely prepared for in terms of how things was going to affect me. And, you know, being vocal about it and being on media and doing different things and whatever, it was like, wow. So straight away, I just got into things that are going to protect me from that, ways that I can kind of stay away from it and not let it affect me. So yeah, I think the majority of it has come through my own experience transitioning and being very public about it.
Yeah. Learning as you go. It's really interesting you're sort of describing that barrier that social media, you know, was there before social media, and now everyone has access to you, and it's okay to say, to put boundaries in and not have everybody have access to you.
Yeah, I think sometimes we do feel guilty, like myself. I was very public about my journey and posting pictures and, you know, really the intricate stuff of transitioning. And I had that whole euphoria going on. But at the same time, I noticed that a lot of people was following me to get that information, people that wasn't aware, and friends and family was learning from my page. And then it kind of, I felt the kind of burnout stage where, you know, this is not so much I'm not a kind of episode. This is not episodes of my life. This is actually me living it. And I've got to take some time away and actually understand these things for myself, and not put in the fact that I want to educate people. I want to educate people. It's more like, no, I need to understand, experience it, and actually live, focus on living at the same time. And I think sometimes we have that guilt where that can set in as well, where we need our own time to actually experience life. And you know, for some of us, we have transitioned later in life, or we've been waiting a long time. So when that comes, it's like, it's a whole new life that you need to, or you want to experience. So, you know, I think it's having that balance between, if for some people having that outlet or being vocal about their journey and being visible, it is support for them. The people that come and get involved, it is very supportive. But at the same time, it's just having that balance where you actually live at the same time.
Yeah. And it's okay if sharing your story is only for a time. You know, like I've heard some people say that quite often, actually, that, you know, there is this period of time where they're happy to share, to educate, and then they just now want to move over into just going and living their lives now, and that's completely okay.
Yeah, I understand that.
I think it's really important as well that, you know, being trans isn't the sum total of our life. You know, and you know, coming back to the self-care, Nate, you know, you are a musician. You know, I don't know about you. I don't want to be defined by being a trans woman. I want to be defined by the counsellor I am, by the parent that I am, by the music I play, or, you know, the things that I've done, that I've achieved, you know, are really important. I think it's very easy for trans people in particular to get sucked into this argument, and then we start, you know, we forget that we've got a whole life that's equally important, and that the more we go about that, the easier it is to deal with the phobia, I suppose, the transphobia.
Just something you said there as well, Marianne. You know, I was labelled by the BBC as the UK's first transgender grime artist. And at first it was like, okay, that's a title I didn't say. I was kind of given that. And along the way, it's kind of like, I know titles can be important for people and it helps us. It gives us that sense of belonging to a group of people or somewhere. But at the same time, I started to feel like that's all I was seen as, a transgender rapper. And it was like, well, what makes me a transgender rapper? I'm a rapper who's transitioned. Do you know what I mean? We're not no different to cis rappers. So I kind of started to move away from that title and, you know, come away from it because of those kind of things, and the fact I'm not very comfortable with, you know, people just saying, oh, we trans and that's it. There's a lot more to us than just that label of being trans.
I like to think it's the least interesting thing about me, if I'm honest, you know.
I think it speaks to like a desire to see us as static as well, that like with this one thing and that's who we are and it doesn't change. And like in the way that, you know, when Nate, you were talking about at first you wanted to share the story, and then as the time went on you were like, actually need to save some of this for me, and that's changed. Like I think that speaks to that like process of change and being happy and accepting of that like I wanted this thing, now I want this thing, now I want this thing, and it changes. It's just like a part of being human, and that applies to like your identity and your life and all kinds of situations, that like we're fluid and nothing is fixed, and you just got to embrace change.
Definitely.
Really, really important. And there's a comment that's just come through saying it's a shame and it's exhausting that I feel I have to become some sort of spokesperson for the trans community to get the support I need. I think there's something in that that's you know, teasing apart a little bit more of what we're talking about, that it on the one hand, your stories are so important because people like me really change when I hear them. And there also has to be an allowance of flexibility and movement and change, just like you were saying, Rhy. You can't, you know, people like people to be in boxes, and that's how we understand them in their little, you know, binary boxes. And that change, you know, is part of transitioning and working out who you are, and just generally moving around in life, and so everybody has to have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone else said, without the online presence of social media, I would still be struggling, fighting my internal demons and locked into the shame and self-loathing engendered by mainstream media, peers and other figures. And I think we sort of touched on that as well. It's social media has an important role to play. And I don't know, I mean, we talked about YouTube was significant in my understanding, and I'm really enjoying seeing people on TikTok just living their lives, and that's also helping me learn as well.
Just going back to what, you know, we were saying there about there's more to us than just our trans identity. And actually, Nate, you know, the fact that you are a musician and the fact that you know, there's some prominence there, I think people will discover the trans identity if that becomes less a part of your music. Hopefully, from what you're saying, it will. But the fact that you're there still doing music is really important. And I think if we just pull away from being, I mean, I've never considered myself an activist. I don't think you can be trans on social media and not be classed as an activist, because as soon as you defend yourself. But I can't not be present on social media. And but you know, you just hope that actually people find you for the right reasons, and that when they see that you've got a life and see the other things that you're interested in, that the trans will almost be forgot, but you've still inspired somebody else to find their own identity for many reasons, I suppose.
Yeah,
I'm hoping that made sense. I knew what it meant.
Yeah, and I hear that, you know, from lots of trans people when they come for their IGSs, you know, oh, the thing that really, you know, turned the light bulb on for me was seeing ContraPoint or someone else on YouTube or someone else coming out. And so those stories are so important. And but as we said, there's got to be a freedom within it for everybody.
I think for us as well as a community, I think when we do see those kind of stories, I think it's good for us as well to get behind those people, share those stories, comment on those stories, like those stories. Don't just watch them. Do you know what I mean? And let's start supporting each other. And as I said earlier, for somebody to share their story and knowing, or let's go from my experience of what I expected, it's a big thing to actually go and do that. So I think, you know, having that support from the community is a big thing as well.
I do think there's a process we go through, Nate, and I've got a feeling you may have gone through it. When we do come out and we start talking about this, we almost want to shout about it. You know, that self, finding our true self, you know, suddenly we want to tell everybody about it, and then we do move beyond that. So I think it sounds like, you know, at least for you and I can you know, agree with that, is that yeah, you did what you had to do to get through and maintain your career, and hopefully we're allowed to move beyond that. But that again, the main source of negative information I get is from other trans people, because it's overwhelmingly, I don't go searching it out. Why can we start and share all the good stuff as well? You know, if we flooded social media with the good stuff, then maybe the bad will just kind of disappear. That would be good self-care, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think not retweeting the bad stuff is definitely a good ethic to have online. As you say, even if it's just because so your other trans friends don't have to see it. I think it kind of also speaks to what we were saying at the beginning of the live stream about like what can cis people do. I was thinking that like if cis people come across a news article and they're like, well, I think this is transphobic, but I'm not really sure. Don't just like send it to the one trans person that you know. I think it would be better if, you know, if you want to have a discussion about it, ask first. Just be like, I've seen something, you know, do you have the space to chat about it? I have this perspective on it. And, you know, let that person say no if they don't have the reserves for dealing with it. But definitely don't just like cold share something a bit problematic. Because, yeah, that's definitely not helping.
That's a really good tip. Well, we are almost at the end of the live stream, I'm afraid, but it's been so good to hear everybody's little bits of your stories and hear your ideas for self-care and what that means to you. I don't know about you, but I could spend another 2 hours talking about all of this. An hour is not long enough. But thank you to everybody that has participated. If I didn't get to your comment, I'm really sorry, but I really appreciated seeing them come through and knowing that you were watching and listening. And then hopefully, I don't know if this is sort of going to be made available, but hopefully it will continue to educate and be a good starting point. So thank you very much, and hopefully we will see you all at some point in the future. And I don't know if it's the correct etiquette to wish people a good IDAHoBiT day. I mean, you know, but it's good to mark and acknowledge the fact that, you know, that this exists and this is how we're living and dealing with it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you all soon.
Thanks.